Sheriff Jack Harrison woke up to a strange sound. Not the ringing of an alarm clock, not his German shepherd's bark, but silence. Too much silence. In Miller's Valley, a lost town in the Nevada desert, with a population of 847, it was always noisy. Farmers' tractors, kids on their way to school, old Joe starting his pickup with such a roar the whole block could hear. But today, nothing. Jack got dressed, fastened his sheriff's star, and stepped onto the porch. The desert stretched before him, bathed in the crimson light of the rising sun. The red rocks looked majestic as always, but something was wrong. He got into his patrol car, an old Ford Crown Victoria that remembered his father, and drove down Main Street. The first thing he noticed was the Shell gas station on the way out of town. The doors were wide open, no one inside. The cash register was open, money still there, but the owner, Mr. Chen, was gone. Jack got out of the car, adjusted his belt with the holster. His 1911 Colt, a faithful companion for 15 years of service, was in place. "Hey, anyone there?" His voice echoed through the empty gas station. No one answered. He got back in the car and drove on. Next was Maria's diner. Same picture. Doors open, coffee still warm on the stove, but no Maria, no her assistants, no customers. By noon, Jack had driven through the entire town. Out of 847 residents, there was not a single one. Everyone had disappeared, as if they had never existed. But the strangest thing was yet to come. When he returned to the station, a folder lay on his desk, a red folder labeled Top Secret, with the seal of the U.S. Department of Defense. Jack opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, his town, his people. But they weren't taken from the outside. They were taken from the inside. X-ray images, medical records, psychological profiles, and at the end of the document, one phrase, Project Clean Slate, Next Generation Weapon Testing. Subjects, 847. Date, December 10th, 2024. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a kidnapping. This was a test. His town, his people. They were lab rats. At that moment, the radio in his car came to life. "Attention, Miller's Valley. This is the National Guard. The town is declared a quarantine zone. Everyone stay in place. Evacuation prohibited. I repeat." Jack turned off the radio. He walked to the window and looked out at the desert. In the distance, on the horizon, dust was rising. A lot of dust. A convoy of vehicles, military vehicles. They were coming back. Jack put on his sheriff's star. He checked the magazine in his Colt. 12 rounds. 12 rounds against an entire army. But he was the sheriff of Miller's Valley, and he wasn't going to run. He stepped out into the street and stood in the middle of the road, alone, with a star on his chest and a revolver on his hip. The dust was approaching. Jack knew he couldn't stop the military convoy alone, but he had an advantage. He knew this town, every house, every street, every basement, and he remembered the strange sounds he'd heard at night for the past few months. A dull rumble from somewhere underground, a vibration that made the windows in the station rattle. Something was under the town. He got in the car and drove to the old mine on the outskirts. It had been abandoned since the 70s, but Jack remembered his father telling him the government was building something there. Officially, a document storage facility. Unofficially, Jack never believed official versions. The mine entrance was blocked with rocks, but Jack knew another way, through the old well in the cemetery. He parked at the cemetery gates. The dust from the military convoy was closer now, a couple of miles from town. He had maybe 30, maybe 40 minutes. The well was hidden behind his grandfather's tombstone. Jack pushed aside the heavy stone slab and climbed down the rusty ladder. Underground it was dark and cold. He turned on his flashlight. The tunnel went horizontally, deep under the town. The walls were concrete, not natural rock. This was definitely built recently. He walked for about 10 minutes until he hit a steel door. There was no lock on it, only an electronic panel. Dead. Apparently the power was cut. Jack looked closer. The panel was an old system. He took a multi-tool from his pocket and shorted 2 contacts. The door hissed open. Behind it was a huge underground complex, a laboratory, hundreds of monitors, medical beds, cells, and files, thousands of files on tables. Jack approached the nearest computer. It was still working. On the screen was a map of his town, and on it, 847 red dots. Each dot was a person. Next to it, status, subject 001-234, terminated. Subject 235-567, terminated. Subject 568-847, pending. Jack felt his stomach twist. Terminated, not evacuated, not relocated. Terminated. He opened one of the files. A photograph of Mr. Chen from the gas station. Diagnosis. Experimental neurotoxic weapon Shadow. Test 47. Lethality 100%. Action time 3 to 5 minutes. They were poisoning their own citizens. Jack heard a sound from above, the hum of helicopters. They were here. He grabbed a flash drive from the nearest computer and put it in his pocket. It had all the data, all the evidence. Now he had not only honor, he had the truth, and he was going to tell it. Jack climbed out of the well just as the first military trucks were entering the town. Soldiers in black uniforms without insignia poured out into the streets. They moved professionally, silently. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were cleaners. Jack hid behind a tombstone and watched. They weren't looking for survivors. They were looking for bodies, or what was left of them. One of the soldiers approached his patrol car, parked at the station, said something into the radio. Another soldier nodded and took out a canister. Gasoline. They were going to burn down the station, erase all evidence. Jack clenched his revolver. 12 rounds. 4 soldiers at his car. At least 20 more around town. Helicopters in the sky. Suicide. But this was his town. His people. Jack took a deep breath. He remembered the faces of those he'd known all his life. Mr. Chen, who gave him a discount on gas. Maria, who fed him free coffee in the mornings. Old Joe, who taught him to fish. 847 lives. Jack stepped out from behind the tombstone. "Hey!" he shouted. The soldiers turned. 4 at the car. Their hands reached for their rifles. Jack didn't give them a chance. First shot. The soldier with the canister. Second. The one closest to the radio. Third and fourth. The rest. He didn't aim for the head. He aimed to kill. The other soldiers in town heard the shots. They ran toward the station. Jack ran inside, slammed the door, and piled a cabinet against it. He had maybe 2 minutes. He took out the flash drive, inserted it into the station computer, started uploading files to all possible servers, news agencies, human rights organizations, congressmen, progress bar, 15%, 30%, 50%. The door shook from impacts. Open up. Federal service. 60%, 75%. Shots at the door. Bullets piercing the wood. 90%, 95%. The door began to break. 99%, 100%. Upload complete. Jack smiled. He took out the last round. Saved it for himself. Better to die free than become their lab rat. The door crashed down. Soldiers stormed inside. Jack raised his revolver, but not to his temple, to the ceiling. "I am Sheriff Jack Harrison from Miller's Valley," he shouted, "and I surrender, but let the whole country know what you did here." He threw his revolver on the floor. One of the soldiers approached, put handcuffs on him. "You made a mistake, Sheriff," the soldier said quietly. "Now you're one of us." Jack smiled. "No, now you're one of mine, because the whole country will soon see what you did." They led him away. But the truth was already free. The files were uploaded, the evidence was out there. News agencies would receive them, human rights organizations would investigate, congressmen would ask questions. Jack Harrison, sheriff of Miller's Valley, had done his duty. He hadn't saved his town. He couldn't save his people, but he had given them justice, and that was enough. Somewhere in Washington, computers were printing out his files. Somewhere in New York, journalists were reading his evidence. Somewhere across America, people were learning the truth about Miller's Valley. Project Clean Slate was over. The conspiracy was exposed. And one sheriff with 12 rounds and unbreakable courage had brought down an entire government operation. This is the story of Jack Harrison, the last sheriff, Day Zero.